Data storytellers, we're back. The momentum keeps building with advanced business communications and storytelling for data professionals, or advanced business communications for data storytellers.
Yes, ABCDS.
Yes. That's yes. Yeah. Correct. And the last episode about the cognitive biases, I loved it. And I think Dave has some surprises in store for today as well. So I can't wait to unpack this.
Yeah, we're going to stay on the McRaney train for at least one more episode. I think we'll be able to get it all in this session. But as we were talking before we started, one of the things that is so important about How Minds Change, and that's his third book, to the best of my knowledge. So last time we talked about You Are Not So Smart, then we talked about You Are Less Dumb, and they're more or less two parts of one book. If you wanted, like, if you were to sell me something where you took both of them and somehow glued them into one big book, nobody would be the wiser, because it's, as far as I could tell, it's the same content. It's just two of them. He might be, if he ever gets to hear this, he might cringe. He'd be like, "Oh, that dummy missed the nuance between the two." But as far as I'm concerned, you've got this great compendium of two books, super entertaining. They cover something in the neighborhood of like 30 different cognitive biases, and it was so important and timely because, before we talked about McRaney, we talked about Claff. One of the great things that Claff introduces to this whole strategic communication thing was that croc brain, that economic miser. And we know, okay, the brain is metabolically expensive. The croc brain is going to try to ignore, okay, whatever, but it's also going to try to summarize in like the most crass and crude and unproductive way imaginable. And so what are 30 ways that thing's going to summarize incorrectly? Not exactly a one-for-one correlation, but it's pretty close. And knowing what they might be trying to do allows you to, again, it's kind of like chess or jiu-jitsu or anything, or football, where there's, tactic, counter-tactic, re-counter-tactic, re-counter-tactic, and so on until somebody wins. Although, speaking of winning, we're going to stop thinking about this as winning, because we're talking about how minds change, and getting out of the winning mindset is one of the things that are part of this. So today we're talking about how minds change. It's probably the densest of the books we've talked about so far, right? So if, Cialdini, the red book, not the yellow book. Maybe we have a books of commensurate density here, because that's the more technical form. But the red book for Cialdini, that is for everybody. That is the mass market paperback. Cialdini's like, I got some great ideas. Let me distill that so everybody can read it. Yep,
it's not long. Yeah, it's almost like a thick booklet in a way.
Yeah,
and it's just weapons grade concentration of psychological tools. Yeah,
exactly. And then you've got Voss. Voss is very, very approachable, very low density, very easy to read. My favorite, because of how actionable it is. I mean, literally, like within the hour of reading it, you're doing things. It's that good. Claff, also highly approachable, right? A little bit more of a narrow focus, because he's very much coming at it from like those big ticket deals as an iBanker. But the prose isn't hard to read, and iBankers have to communicate very plainly. The book's very approachable, and the whole thing with the croc and the frame battles and all that stuff, it's fun to read. Then we get into the McRaney books. The first two, easy to read, fun to read. Airplane books, perfect airplane books. How Minds Change, this one's harder. I'm not saying it's hard. I'm not saying it's difficult. I'm not, like, especially, our typical audience here, 135 IQ and north, they're going to be fine from a technical point of view. But if the other like four were like airplane books, this is not an airplane book. This is more of like a sit at home with a cup of tea or coffee or whatever. Give it some time, give it some study, because this has, I probably think, like more science than the other ones.
Okay. Like a cruise book. You need like a week and come and see.
Okay, beach book. Yeah. So actually, fun fact, on my honeymoon, I brought a technical book, and I was at the book reading it. My wife was like suntanning. I had it, but because of the way the sun was, I had to have my back to the ocean. And she took a picture of me, and it says, this man flew halfway across the globe to have his back to the ocean. Anyway, just
true data scientist
couldn't
spirit.
read.
Yeah.
Like, the glare was just blinding off the page, so I had to turn around.
It was getting, the sun was getting in the way.
Yeah, exactly. The beat, the environment was counterproductive for reading. How do you go figure? But anyway, so we're talking about how minds change, and I was starting to say this before we started today. When I first read the book, I think I found there's like a 9-bullet summary, and I thought it was like the perfect explanation of minds changing. I thought it was a great way to just tie a lot of the stuff that you develop as a data scientist to persuasion. Like, this felt like, even though it was very scientific, it might have had the shortest gap between the language and the training that I have and the language of the training that they're using. So that was, cool. This should be a real good one for anybody that's tuning in. But what was missing the first time I read it, and doing the work to prepare for these podcasts helped me to discover, was persuasion as learning. And that's the razor's edge that we're going to walk on, because if you think about learning, what is learning?
New information.
Right, but exactly, information. I know something, you don't know it. My job is to convey it to you. But if you're doing it in a persuasive setting, and we go back and we recall how Claff frames it, I'm doing what? I'm taking stuff from my prefrontal executive cortex, and I am putting it in front of your what?
Your croc brain, yeah.
Croc brain. So if we superficially examine this and walk away with, it's learning, that's a very, very large pitfall to fall into, where, learning, I'll just teach, and I'm teaching by vomiting facts. And if I vomit facts, maybe I can overcome you, and then you're going to agree with me. So it's learning. It is learning. 100% a learning thing, but now you have to think about like the pedagogical arts or sciences, because it's not fact vomit. And the book even says, like, you will 100% fail if you go into bombard them with facts. But you will only win if you think about persuasion as learning. So let's square that circle, because I think you almost have to like reconsider what it means to learn and to know. So that's where the book, I think, really carves out some new territory. And it's like, I didn't get it on my first reading. Or like, so it was there, but I didn't appreciate it. Then I went back and like kind of reread it to get ready. I was like, wow, dude, I can't believe I missed this the first time.
And last time when we went through everything, so again, I haven't read the book. So, we talked about it before, so I had a good idea, but then there were all these like interesting tidbits about the certain biases. But then when you drop that frame of the learning frame, that immediately connected so many dots. Right. And it's very interesting that because I had the same thought of, learning, but then it's the exact opposite of the stereotypical tenured professor at the legacy academia who just vomits facts, from that kind of ivory tower of pride, but it's a very different type of learning.
Right. And so let's get into facts, learning, persuasion, and how this little trifecta all kind of come together, right? So just already said it, but we're going to emphasize this, because data science professionals, this is our biggest Achilles heel when it comes to persuasion. You cannot persuade somebody with facts. And there's so much to that, but just take that on its face. You cannot persuade with facts. You cannot use your prefrontal cortex, your executive brain, to circumvent, overpower the croc brain. Croc brain wants to ignore the facts. Okay. And then with all those biases, we know that like there's confirmation bias, there's protect your paradigm bias, like the Bezel or whatever. I already forgot the name. I remember last time, like I kept stumbling over the name. We got to it, and I slapped myself on the forehead.
The Semmelweis one.
Yeah. No, see, I can't.
It was a nice surprise, that could relate to it.
Thank goodness my counterparty is Hungarian. Otherwise,
you always need a Hungarian in these conversations.
The token Hungarian. So here's why. So facts don't work. But we're going to do learning. And McRaney's whole angle here, and what seems to work in the book, is we're not really persuading them at all. We're making space for them to persuade themselves. And persuading yourself is the lens through which learning is sort of defined in this case, right? Because I can learn that Joe Biden is president. Pretend I was in a coma for the last couple of years to wake up. Who's president? Oh, it's Joe Biden. Oh, I just learned that. Okay, but that's not a fact being revealed is not learning. The learning comes from I wake up from this coma. Okay, and I have an operating system. I have a worldview. And the worldview says, let's say I was in a coma for a very long time. Let's just go back to Barack. Barack's a president. Okay. So I am walking around with that information. So if anyone bumped into me, this is the spider monkey thing from last time. If anybody bumped into me and they were like, "Hey, who's the president?" "Oh, Barack Obama." "Well, actually, it's Joe Biden. Here, let me there's evidence that it was him." And then I'm gonna have this moment where I'm like, "Oh shit, I have a problem. This guy's telling me that Joe Biden's a president. My worldview and my experience and my model of the world, my priors, for those of you that like Bayesian statistics, says Barack." So I have to then reject the evidence, or I have to incorporate it into my model. When I incorporate it into my model, I update my model. That's learning. Now, that was a fact that was incorporated into a model. Now, that's a very simple example, but when you get into more complicated stuff, like should we enter the Florida market? Should we release the product with the pink version? Should we fund this marketing campaign or that marketing campaign? Or should we market to 30-year-old men versus 30-year-old? All of these different decisions where there's suddenly all this nuance, and it's not easy to know if you're right or wrong. That's where you have a model, and that model is helping you determine what's right or wrong. Persuasion is about updating the model. That's what learning is. And so that's what we say learning. I'm not talking about, Biden is president, 2 + 2 is 4. These are like rote facts that can be quickly verified. And these are more like I have a model that says something, like stealing is wrong, maybe, right? That might be my model. And then, maybe then you get these like ethical dilemmas, like the trolley problem. Like you might say to me, black and white, the death of anyone is a tragedy. Trolley problem. Oh, now I've got to think about it, right? So you have to like the challenge is a simple binary. So we have models. We have all of these models in our head that we use to make decisions, and the persuasion comes from sort of like injecting a little extra code into the model to see what happens. Okay, and when you end up with a new model, you have learned, but you have been persuaded as well.
So I already have so many things that I want to explore there. For example, like choosing the right models to update. So when is it that people are actually open for their models to be updated, right? Again, this is like, I don't want to jump the gun there, but you and I even spoke about that with your data story from back. It was about, hey, there was a situation where people wanted to update their model because their models, what they told them that, hey, we should go for this market. Well, real world evidence showed that needs to be updated. So they were open, but okay, this is very interesting.
And actually they weren't, right? Because there was a lot of pushback because I said, hey, movie theaters. And they were like, no, grocery stores. And so this is where we can tie McRaney into a little bit of Claff, but a lot of bit of Voss.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the mechanisms that everybody seems to like is asking questions. right? If you find yourself in the declarative voice, where you're just, if everything you said was transcribed, it'd be periods, you're losing. You're losing because you're just declaring facts. You're pulling them into cold cognition. You're throwing pearls in front of the crocodile. Doesn't know what to make of them. Safe to ignore or filter in the worst way possible. Oh, they're just marbles. They're not actually valuable. And you end up getting nowhere. And you're frustrated and you start throwing rocks like, oh, they're just dumb. They don't understand how statistics work, right? But questions pull people in, even if you're just doing it from like a straight up oration point of view. So like you're presenting. You're supposed to be doing lots of declarative stuff. You're supposed to be issuing a lot. But what happens? You drone on, even if you're super good at speaking, questions help like hook someone right back in so they pay attention. Even a question is a good way to like turn the hot cognition on a little bit, right? So the question, so when you say it's like, oh, like how do you know if they're open to having their story changed? That's not the thing to solve. The question is really like, well, what's the current story that they're operating with? What's their current model? Like get their model out in the open. Okay. So if it's like, I said, hey, by the way, hey, you asked me to go find places to sell soda. I looked at the grocery store market. It is big, but oh, hey, by the way, I looked at the movie theater market. It's even bigger. In fact, it's so much bigger, and we have zero penetration, or almost zero penetration. Like, well, yeah, that's specious or used, whatever, right? Okay. What is behind your favoring grocery stores? Help me understand how grocery stores got to the top of your list and are stuck as stapled to the top of your list. Things like that. Because, and this is where there's a section in the book that talks about epistemology, which I never really, this is ironic, I never really thought about epistemology. For those that know what it is, they're going to laugh a little bit about that. Before that book, I just kind of was like, all right, I know it's a field, but I never really, it wasn't one that I put my attention to, but like, okay, how do you actually know? How do you know that the grocery store is the best sector for soda? That does, now you have like bilateral opportunities to learn, because remember, like we're not infallible, right? And there's this concept in the book, and Win Bigley does the same thing, where it's like there's multiple competing versions of the truth, and this whole like postmodern milieu that we operate within, like there, you know, they point out, oh, well, let's deconstruct, and you know, there's truth with a little t and truth with a big T and all this other stuff.
Post-truth idea.
Right. We talked about that. Like, why are we here? Well, because we're kind of a post-truth era. You have dueling truths with no real easy way to arbitrate which one's the winner, right? And so, what's your truth? What's my truth? And then can we get both facing in the same direction? So if you're saying something like, oh, well, you know, the grocery store is the best because I go to the grocery store every week. My friends go to the grocery store every week, but we only go to the grocery store, the movie theater once a month or once a quarter. So from a frequency point of view, so I think that, you know, everyone goes grocery shopping all of the time, so it has to be bigger. And there's more grocery stores than movie theaters, so it has to be bigger, and so on and so on and so on. So okay, great. Like that is what you've based your assumptions on. That's what you've based your model on. Okay, then where McRaney would come in, and this is where the application of this book is tricky, and I'll explain why. So if I said, okay, how would you react if I told you 100% of people who go to the movie theaters, buy a large soda, but only 2% of grocery shoppers buy sodas? And you might pause and be like, oh, well, that's interesting. I didn't really think of it that way. I know that we go to the grocery store, but yeah, you're right. I don't actually buy soda ever. Okay, so like that's like a masking thing. So we've got a world where every movie theater patron buys a soda, and a vast minority of grocery store patrons buy soda, So then now you can start to get into, okay, so like the soda wallet is bigger at the movie theater than the grocery store, despite the lower frequency. I mean, this is like a toy example of how like McRaney comes in, but what did I do? Let's deconstruct that for a second. I used a question to essentially say, hey, what if your priors are not correct? And what would your model look like if I gave you new priors? Right? Because you're heavily anchored to everybody goes grocery shopping every week. And people only go to the movie theater once a month. So you have like 25, 1/4 of the frequency, right? But then like 2%, like 50 times the consumption. Oh, that's interesting. And so what I'm going to do, I'm inviting you to update your priors. Now, in this conversation, you might not be ready to let go of your priors. You might not be ready to update your model. And that's where the applicability of this, call it strategy, in a corporate setting where everything is trying to get things done, this is where you're going to run into a little bit of headwind. Because my job, according to McRaney, my job is to try to get you thinking about your model, potentially update your model. But if I can just get you to look at your priors, I've done something. But it might take you 6 months before you're like, you know what, these priors suck, man. I want some new priors. Okay, in the soda world, like who knows how much money you lost, and who knows how much tighter Coca-Cola's grip on the movie theaters has become, right? So you have like that much more inertia. So like I can't wait 6 months for you to finally come to grips with, I've done an extra 30 trips to the grocery store, and I've done an extra 3 trips to the movies, and by golly, he's right. I'm buying a gallon of soda for my family every time we go to the movie theaters, and I haven't bought a single 6-pack in 6 months. So I'm like inceptioning the question, like what are my priors? Are my priors as good as they could be? And what if my priors change? So I'll let you react to that, but like that's where like you can't time box it. I can't force you to be like, okay, lads, what if everyone buys a soda at the movies, nobody buys them at the grocery store, and we're gonna go to market next week. So has your mind changed yet? Because you're gonna like you're gonna start glitching. Your brain's gonna glitch. So that I can't do that. Yes, I can't do it on short notice. I need time to let this kind of marinate, right? Because it's like Inception. You got to get it down to the base of the operating system and kind of let it percolate up.
So the question is how quickly you can do that, but even before we dive into that, so would you say it's a significant move there that you are consciously looking for the common ground? Because you're not disagreeing with them. It's not like the fact that, no, I go to the grocery store all the time. I rarely go to the theater. You can say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not wrong. You know, that people go to the grocery store more often. And that's like a point of agreement there, right?
Yeah.
And then from that, it's like, okay, agreeing. Now, here's a question for you to ponder. So do you have like a specific sequence of the types of questions that you ask here? Maybe like a structural pattern there of how the questions look like? Maybe we can do this in the synthesis, right? But so let's say in that specific scenario, the type of question that you ask about, but how often do you go to the grocery store? And how often do you go? And then from that point on, like, how do you actually get to the model update? What is the runway for that, and how does that look like?
So the book has, I think, 3 different, call it conversation algorithms to kind of accomplish this goal. I don't have them for today.
Okay.
I have a more abstract way to approach this. So let me just make sure what I'm about to talk about is a little bit of a synthesis, a little bit more of it's zooming out around the conversation, less about the conversation itself. I did not transcribe, and I do not have top of mind the algorithm. I think it's something like get out the priors, find some sort of emotional resonance, and then offer places where the priors might need to deviate. I think that's what it was, but don't get that tattooed anywhere.
Just yet. You can get a tattooed one in synthesis. It can go in your forehead.
Buy the books to get the algorithm. That maybe we'll leave the algorithm in the book. That way, we're not just giving away all of McRaney's IP. But here's like a way that I think about this when I'm using it in meetings and on a more aggressive business timeline. All right. So the concept that we're talking about is a truth battle, because there is no big T truth in this case. It's like, should we go after grocery stores or should we go after movie theaters? Right. So the question that I want to ask, or the questions I want to ask myself is, okay, is this a kind of meeting where there is a risk of a truth battle? And in the case of saying go to, like, I'm bucking conventional wisdom, hell yeah, there's going to be a truth battle. But if I know, like, okay, so you're my boss, you had a hypothesis, I did a bunch of analysis, turns out your hypothesis was correct, and here's where you can throw some gas on it so it goes even faster. Like, I don't think we're going to get in a truth battle. We're going to get into a how fast can you get this scaled out so that we can exploit this thing that I found and then you found a way to magnify it. But if you're saying, okay, my hypothesis is grocery stores, where are the best grocery stores? And I'm like, actually, it's going to be I know there's a truth battle. Okay. So this is what I do to prepare. First, I ask myself, and this goes back to the last section, where am I dumb? Where am I at risk of being dumb? Okay. I always try to remind myself, I will never know the business as well as the business partner does, but I know the math potentially better than they do, and I can play with the data better than they can. So, my manipulation of the data is less in tune with the business than their business intuition sometimes. So, where might I have committed a faux pas in the sense that the subject matter is just beyond my knowledge? Like, I might be a blue belt in the subject matter and a black belt in the data science, talking to a black belt in the subject matter. Well, we're not playing a data science rule set. We're playing a mixed martial arts rule set to, like, torture this metaphor a little bit. So, hey, like, maybe a black belt in jiu-jitsu gets kicked in the face. Like, oh, there's no kicking in jiu-jitsu. This is UFC, buddy, right? So, like, that kind of environment. So where am I?
It's actually a perfect analogy. Like the
that
whole
actually might work. Yeah.
It works well.
It works better than I thought when I started.
Yeah. It took a swing, it landed. You know?
Yeah. And then, so that's just like, where am I dumb subject matter wise? Then check for cognitive biases. We talked about how data scientists, like, our skill set makes us well equipped to overcome certain biases, but also we're well equipped to fall into them. And then I pressure test it with analogs of my audience. Right? Who have I spoken to? Who can I validate this with? So if I'm going to talk to, say, the chief sales officer, can I talk to some directors in the sales organization, some vice presidents in the sales organization, so that when I go pitch to the CSO, one, I've got a little bit of that, like, Cialdini social proof that I can tap into, but also, the earlier I can get some feedback, there's a couple of things in the McRaney work that you could play into. So first of all, frequency is incredibly important to pierce a model. Okay, so if I'm saying things about, hey, movie theaters, I need to say movie theaters probably like 7, 8, 9, 10 times over 7, 8, 9, 10 conversations to, like, start to drill that into your model. And there was this really great experiment to help quantify that. They were showing playing cards, right? And the person just had to shout out the card when it was on screen. Okay, you know what a deck of 52 playing cards looks like. But then they started putting fake cards in there, like green hearts or like a 13 of spades or something like that. And because they believed, okay, I'm doing this with a real deck, their brain glitched when they saw a card that didn't make any sense. And they kept being like, all right, like, what's going on? Am I off? Are they off? Is someone off? Like, is Mercury in retrograde? Like, what's going on? And after, like, see me, I don't know, like, I'm making this up, like 10 of those completely fake cards, like a purple diamond or something like that. They're like, all right, we are playing a game with fake cards, update the model, and then all of that cognitive
Dissonance?
thank you.
Yeah.
Goes away. And then they can function in this new, so that's like, okay, I know it takes some repetition to get your model updated so that you're no longer struggling to cope with the fact that I said movie theater. So the low stakes pre-conversations are a way to start injecting that so that when you do the big reveal, there's no shock. Right? The cognitive dissonance happened before the meeting, right? And this is the thing that's a little bit disturbing, is that frequency trumps purity, it trumps accuracy, it trumps novelty, it trumps everything, right? Think like that's part of why the Gemini blow up, to put a very aggressive date on this episode. The Gemini blow up from last week with Google.
Oh yeah.
Right? Because it's inaccurate, it's impure, it's incorrect. But imagine a world where like every elementary school kid is using Gemini. Frequency wins. Frequency defines the truth. So yes, you're right. I'll make a very PC version. Thomas Jefferson was the first president of the United States. If 38 million elementary school kids believe it, eventually they're going to be the adults. They're going to be in charge. And they don't have any context to which they could be like, well, no, I know for a fact it was George Washington who was the first president. So frequency trumps everything, which is super
That becomes
scary.
the dominating operating model.
Yeah. And that is so you can exploit that because, there's a cliche of like, if you say a lie enough, it becomes true. Like that's where that comes from. There's actually like studies that show frequency trumps everything else. Okay. And so you can lean into that a bit, get your truth out there, start to campaign your truth with high frequency, low stakes touch points. Okay. You've at least ruled out that you're doing something dumb on the subject matter. You're doing something dumb on the cognitive bias or just executional aspect of it. So like the subject matter stuff makes sense. The data science stuff makes sense. You've pre-circulated it. Okay. And now you're basically armored up. Now that you're armored up, do the big reveal. Do the big meeting. Do the big meeting where the decision gets made. Because now you're ready. That's how I approach it in a corporate setting. So if in the McRaney model, it's kind of like you like initialize the model update request and you wait a few months for it to update before the decision is made. I'm trying to do this. So introduce it, circulate it, try to get them to go through that cognitive dissonance, try to get them to start to at least be open to updating their model so you get to the meeting and the decision was almost predetermined, but you avoid that big tripwire of the person with more power, the stronger frame, to use Claff, having a cognitive dissonance moment and basically just backhanding you right out of the meeting.
Few tactical questions around that. So with that big meeting, was the big decision maker primed as well? Or is that person hearing it for the first time, but you kind of pressure tested that with others who are maybe between you and that person?
It depends how big the big person is. Right? So, one of my former bosses, a super great guy, name was Steve. He said there could be nothing new. So these big, heavy corporate meetings where you've got like a C-suite person or the direct to the C-suite person, these are like very serious meetings. It's all a rehash. There's literally nothing new because like you don't want. So like think of it like I'll use the corporate structure that I used to work at because it had the taller chain of command, right? So you have the SVP that ran all of commercial. And that SVP reported to, I think, an EVP who ran all of the business unit. And then reporting to that SVP were a bunch of VPs. Okay? Now, the SVP, because they're operating at that layer, they can't be in the weeds even at this level. Like, so they lean heavily on their VPs. And the VP was kind of like that one notch above mine. So my job was like I work with the directors, but I sell to the VPs because if the VPs say yes, their yes kind of gets the SVP to move forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because, having a meeting before the meeting with the SVP, probably not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But having the meeting before the meeting with all the VPs, because, for my role, I had 3 primary stakeholders that were VPs that directly reported to the SVP. But I had like other VPs that I had to work with that it was like layers. It was like VPs all the way down, right? But as that consensus starts to accumulate, once you get to the guy one notch below the SVP, you get 3 yeses, you get the yes from the SVP. So that's in a very, very hierarchical, with lots of layers organization. The ultimate big kahuna, probably you can't get them to do the meeting before the meeting, but you could do the meeting before the meeting with the people that are really making the decision. If you think about it, like, he might hold the power, institutional power, but he's looking down one level and being like, hey, you guys cool with this? So in a way, you could do the meeting before the meeting with the decision makers, because the consensus of the directs is the decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where that's exactly how you would set it up.
So with this, okay, that is if you have those multiple champions, because then you would need multiple champion. In this case would be the VPs, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, just to explore this a little bit.
Yeah, man. Poke at it.
What if you only have one VP as a champion? Should you not even go to battle? Or is there a way to... I don't want to get lost in the specific detail, but I'm just interested because a lot of times in my experience, this is a scenario that you have.
This is worth continuing to scratch at. I mean, let's flesh out the hypothetical.
Yeah.
So do you have one excited partner and 2 neutrals, or do you have one excited partner and 2 enemies? Or let's say opposing VPs in this case.
Okay, great question. So let's say I have one champion who's super excited, and then 2 people who are outside of that champion who are kind of on the same level, and they're not against. They are familiar, and they're just kind of going with the flow of they're not gonna sabotage the thing. They are filled in. We kind of have their approval, but they might not even be in that specific conversation.
Then you're probably fine, because like, the decision maker becomes that one champion. If you've got, because essentially those 2 gave you a yes then. If you've essentially locked them into a tacit approval, like, hey, I'm not going to sabotage this, or like, and my axe type of situation, right? Like, fine, they're in. So at that point, you still do have 3 champions. You just have one loud one and 2 quiet ones.
And you need to just point to those people. You just need to kind of make sure that your case includes the multiple stakeholders' approval. So just like conceptually, then you still need multiple, but they don't necessarily need to be at the table.
Yeah, I think it's more interesting when you've got like 2 very clear neutrals or 2 very clear adversaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the case where you've got neutrals, you got work to do. Whatever is in your pitch, whatever is in their model, like, you have not found the thing in their model that got them off neutral. And I want to say that, hopefully I'm not hallucinating, I want to say that's in the book. They talk about that. Like, the book uses very spicy political examples like abortion and gay marriage and that kind of stuff, to show like these are very polarizing, these are very emotionally charged, and there is no objective right answer. Right? You can't just point to something and say that's correct. Okay? Regardless of where you are in the political spectrum, like, these are battles of opinion, battles of truth. It's not like gravity, where like, if I drop this pen, it will fall. It can be empirically validated and all that other stuff. Like, these are debates. These are active debates, right? So he uses those as examples to anchor the whole thing. And one of the
to prove the efficacy and the strength of the approach, that it works even in that environment.
Yeah, because this thing would be kind of pointless if I was walking around trying to persuade people that gravity was real. Mm-hmm. Like, drop the pen, dude. Like, hello, what do you think it is? It has to be opinion based, because a business is opinion based. Oftentimes we use data to reduce uncertainty, but at the end of the day, it's an opinion, right? I could show you until I'm blue in the face that the movie theater market is the best market for soda. But still, like, you could say yes, but like, I'd rather, like, I have other reasons, other justifications why we should stay in supermarket. Right?
Not to go down the rabbit hole, but I think there are people who think that the gravity is not real in terms of there is an effect of gravity, but the point is that even in that case, you would need to find like where is the disconnect, right? And then what model I need to update there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a true neutral is there's something that like, why are they apathetic? You got to find out why they're apathetic. Why are you neutral? How can you be neutral about something? Right? You either want to shut it down or you want to put it forward. But like being true, it's true neutral is an illusion, right? A person who's neutral and declares neutral in a corporate environment is really a no that's trying to be nice to you. In my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah. No, 100%. Everything is a no until it's a yes. So it's
right. And if it's a yes, you need a how. Otherwise, it's fake too.
So true.
Boss. Right.
No, this is great because even on the playbook field manual level, just knowing that, okay, I need the multiple supporters, right? If I want to get the big decision maker, that like what is the nature of the persuasion game on the different levels? That's critical to know.
And it could be, do you need all three? So I'm using this example where I had three, right? Sometimes you don't need all three. Maybe you just need the one. Like, one of them was the gatekeeper for Salesforce. You probably don't need all of the gatekeepers if it's a pure Salesforce play, for example. Right? So if they're like aggressively neutral, they're really a no, but they're trying to be friendly, polite,
and then diplomatic. Yeah. So
now you got to figure out how to get the no out. And if they're actually adversarial, they're like overtly opposing you. Again, you got to figure out how to get the model out of like what's their operating model. But I start to think, all right, well, if I'm data science and I'm getting an overt no, I'm getting like here, like, hey guys, I'm thinking movie theaters. No, and I'm not going to let this go anywhere else but this office or something like that. Like, oh shit, okay. Well, here's the thing. That's not the time to ask why. Don't do that. You could try to help me understand, but like overt no's in a situation where you're like, you need something. We know that like asking questions to get no is a good thing, but if you asked a yes question and got a no, like there's something there. But I'm always inclined to say, maybe I got to go sharpen my pencils. Right? Because we still operate in an environment where like we're the cool but nerdy kids. We're bringing things that people maybe hadn't thought about before. If the VP says no, first question, okay, how did I get that wrong? Second question, all right, let me drop down into their director layer and see if I can get some consensus down there. Because those guys are much safer. You can challenge, you can go back and forth with them, you can iterate with them. You can't iterate with the VP. The VP's time is too precious. VP's got 30 things to do, right? Their crock brain's like, get out of my office. Right? So you got to go down a level, right? And that we did that. Like I have real world experience of this, man. Like we were doing stuff with brokers. VP of broker was like swatted us away, drop into the director layer, work through that, get a better okay. And it turned out we didn't have a good conceptualization of the problem. So we're solving the wrong problem. So we're building a model that's just not useful. And so we're just like, we're smart, listen to us. And they're like, your model sucks. But they didn't have that language to articulate. We didn't have the language to articulate. So we just got stonewalled, dropped down, build a rapport with the directors. Then we got a champion from the director layer. Director layer goes back to the VP. Hey, these guys mean well. They work hard. They've got some good stuff. Give them another chance. We got the chance and we were off to the races. That became our biggest business champion. But we were like, it's like we wanted to get to the head of the entire business unit. We went after, say, the the VP of distribution. VP of distribution is like, no. Drop down to like, I don't know, director of something. And then, oh, okay, that actually could work. And then you start to move back up.
This is so powerful because after a no, to find your way back, that's huge, right? So this shows like how powerful this approach is of no, find the level of consensus. If you really want to drive it and you want to get a second chance, and that usually there are no second chances in that environment, but if you want to, well, that's the way to go. Find the level of consensus and build your way back up. And it makes sense because now that we're talking about it, based on my experiences, this actually exactly how it plays out.
Right. And you said like there's no second chance. I think there's plenty of second chances. There's tons of second chances. I mean, we all work for the same. I mean, generally speaking, the archetypal person that we're building this for is at the same company as the person from whom they're trying to get the second chance. It's like, I got to see you on the way to the coffee machine, or I'm going to see you in the cafeteria. We're all basically getting bonus off the same multiplier. So you might whiff. You got to do the mea culpa. You might have to do some penance. You might have to go down a layer in the organization, do some skunks work in order to get back up. But there's an abundance of second chances unless you do something so egregious that your department gets liquidated.
Yeah,
Fine.
exactly. I mean, if you know how to do it, how to get the second chance, there are plenty of second chances. Yeah.
Especially, we're talking to directors and VPs. Okay, so if you get stonewalled by directors, VPs, or SVPs, drop down, do the N-1, right? Somebody's got a problem that your skill set's going to solve like that. And then you can get an advocate. And even if the advocate becomes your Trojan horse to get their model, get that other person's model out, because they're going to be way more candid. So you could even say, hey, N-1, which is a terrible way to refer to somebody, but I don't want to use names.
Good old N-1.
Good old N-1. We put forth this perspective, this point of view. It got basically blasted. We suspect that there's something in the paradigm that N is using. Like, how do you guys think about this? And N-1 probably has a good proxy of what N's model is. So you can get N's priors on the table without having to confront N, incorporate their priors into your model to make sure you didn't screw up. Go back and speak to their prior. You learn the buttons that they matter, because you might find out, N+2 gave N a ration of shit, and so N is hypersensitive about this topic that you're actually trying to solve. But because you hadn't done the necessary, even if it's political, like performative, like, oh, we come to you to help, like they were being very defensive because they're very sensitive about that topic. Even if you had the right answer, even if you were like, yo, we're going into movie theaters, we're going to make a skadillion dollars, but they're like, this person just came up with the most beautiful, end cap marketing campaign for grocery stores, and the CEO basically chewed him out because market sales are flat or something, whatever. Like, I'm trying to construct this.
Yeah.
But the point being, okay, so they're hypersensitive about the topic. We just stomped all over it, and then we're asking them to update their model while we're stepping on a raw nerve. Okay, that makes sense. So let's back up, come in more gently, and then again make a space for them to update their priors.
So I love this because, and I know that we're going to get there in the synthesis, right?
Yeah.
But to know what kind of questions to ask N about the tripwires and the biases and the worries and concerns and desires and frustrations of N+1, right? To have that kind of roadmap based on the most common cognitive biases, right? Now, that'd be amazing, because once you have that, then you can just take the narrative structure also that we talked about in the class and just like design it and build it to make sure that it does not get roadblocked. Basically. Do you have any, and I know again with this probably that algorithm that he has, so would you want to leave that, I think, for the synthesis when the actual sequence of questions, or do you have some typical questions that you would ask N about N+1?
So you can always do this is like open-ended calibrated questions from Voss, right? but now you're kind of coming at it from an epistemology point of view, and even like an empathy point of view. And you can go, but if you know that N is not pissed anymore, you can just talk to N directly. You don't have to go to N-1 to do that last maybe like 5 minutes was just when N is like no, and like you can tell like, okay, red line, I'm not going to get to N+1 until I can solve for N, because N will torpedo you in the big meeting, and then you're SOL. Even if you've got one champion and one very dug in adversary, you're not going to get it from N+1 if N+1 has all the actual positional power. But
so what if you haven't had any exchanges yet with N+1?
So, yeah, let's go with neutral.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but neutral. You still would want to kind of prepare for those biases. Yeah.
So like if you've got that VP layer, okay, maybe you're just starting with the VP layer.
Yeah.
Okay, so you haven't actually figured out if you've got challengers, champions, or adversaries. You've got the narrative structure, right? Context, case for change. You could even do like cost of doing nothing, right? So let's go back to the soda example, right? So like, our company's soda sales have been going down every year for the last 3 years. I was asked by this committee, you VP being one of them, to find a way to grow soda sales. Where's the growth? Who's drinking the soda? In an environment where people are cutting back on their soda consumption. God, this metaphor works on so many layers to the actual thing I was doing.
I know. That's why we keep coming back to it 2 years later,
Yeah. So, who's drinking the soda? So we went to the market. We went to the data. Everybody said, hey, grocery stores, I mean, that's where the soda sits. It's got, so many linear feet and so on. It's got to be grocery stores, all right? And I even make this joke. If you ask 10 people where the soda's getting bought, 11 are going to say grocery stores because somebody walked by, but everybody unanimously agrees it's grocery stores. Okay, great. However, we had this idea that we wanted to also investigate, which is the idea of the movie theater. You could even couch that so you have like a narrative in the narrative. I went to go see, Barbie with my wife, and what do you know? I had a liter of Diet Coke as I sat down to watch Barbie with my wife. I'm drinking, and in the moment I'm like, wow, I'm drinking soda here. And I never drink soda. I never buy it from my house at the grocery store. I never buy it when I go out to eat. I drink seltzer. But like for some reason, Diet Coke, right? At the movies. Movie theaters might be a good market. Let me see if there's a market there. Do an analysis of the, oh my God, there's so much here. There's so much untapped potential in the movie theater market. So I have a pre-canned proposal. Hey, there's a lot of money in grocery stores. I'm not going to pretend it's not. But we found this massive pile of money waiting for us in the movie theater market. And then just kind of let that land. Okay? Because I don't know if you're going to be resistant or not. I don't know if I'm about to step into a lurking hypothesis that you've always had but never articulated. I don't know if I'm going to walk into someone like the book talks about swans, like black swan. Like maybe you've seen a black swan before, and I'm about to say, hey, by the way, I found a black swan, but you've never want to tell anybody because you sound crazy or something. Or like, imagine you're that soda executive, and you had this hunch. I'm like, I bet movie theaters are a thing.
So just to like engage with that, then I would imagine that a common objection for that would be the most obvious one, that no one does movie theaters. And that would be like in general, none of our competitors do. I've been in this business for 20 years. Not once did we try to sell to movie theaters. Or another one could be something like, actually a few years ago, there was an attempt to movie theaters, did not really work out as expected. Neither of those, by the way, would be a justification for not trying, and especially that your data clearly says that that's the way to go, right? But then you would just wait for that to come forth.
Yeah, that's the truth battle. We are having a truth battle. So like I said, right, I'm bringing a potentially, not guaranteed, but a potentially controversial insight. and I want to motivate a behavior change based on that potentially controversial insight. So I might have you swat it away. And you might say, hey, I've been doing soda for 20 years. Okay. 5 years ago, we tried to go into movie theaters and catastrophe. Or we, like you said, nobody, like, that's fake because nobody makes money in movie theaters. Other myriad reasons, right? We're going to go with those two for now. We tried before and we failed. Or the analysis, like if you had done a deeper analysis, you know that while there's a lot of revenue to be had in movie theaters, the margin sucks and you end up taking a loss. It's more of a brand recognition and a marketing channel than an actual make money off of soda channel. Pretend that's the thing. Some like soda executive is like, oh man, these guys are good. I don't know.
Taking notes.
Yeah, I think you've had somebody from Coke on TDS, like
not just Coke, also Pepsi. It was so funny.
So they're both like, oh man, this guy, we got silence.
We had them on the same masterclass too. Yeah,
nice.
And then 2 episodes of great episodes, by the way. Great episodes. Pete and Brian, shout out. So
So, okay, now let's keep working through the McRaney model, right? So I say movie theater. You say, no, movie theaters are a bad idea because blah and blah. Okay. Let's go with we tried before and failed. Okay. Now I need to, tell me everything about why it failed. Okay. What caused us to fail last time? Competitor entrenchment. Okay. How strong are those competitors today? So let's say pretend that we're Coke and they're Pepsi. Okay, so we tried to take movie theaters. We tried to take over AMC. Pepsi was already there. Pepsi was heavily entrenched. We could not budge them. Okay. How strong is their position today? I don't know. Okay, well, let me take this back as a question, but like, how would you react if I could find some data that illustrated that Pepsi was in a less strong position? I won't say that they're in a precarious position, but let's say a less strong position. Let that land, let you think about it. Okay, how would you react to that information? Let's say you say, okay, I would be open to exploring this. Now that's kind of like where the McRaney model is like, right? Because I'm just trying to make space for you to update your model, and I can go back and I can go check, like, how strong is AMC Pepsi? Or how's Pepsi doing? You know, because if I did like a market research and said that like collectively space to update your model, and then I kind of like walk away.
It's also very interesting to me that, you know, my mind was going, okay, so am I going to ask a Voss style no question of, hey, would you, so if let's say we uncovered through some data that Pepsi is not so interested, or they are in a weaker position or not so strong position, would you be against doing that? But McRaney leans more on the point here is the space that you give that person. So it's like,
how
leaning more towards the open-ended.
Yeah, how would your model change? And that's kind of the calibrated question. I mean, the quick no question is when you're taking those baby steps to get in. Yeah. But now we're in the thick of it, right? So this isn't time for like a tactical retreat. This is time to like get that model out there and say, okay, which of your core assumptions are the weakest? And which one are you clinging to? And which one might you have some ego invested in? This is all kind of the unpacking of the model. So we said, okay, we tried. Pepsi was too entrenched. I said, okay, how would it affect your strategy if we had good, hard evidence that Pepsi is no longer entrenched, that their position is less strong? There might be an opportunity there. And I mean, going down the example of, well, what if we had a consumer preference data that just showed that Pepsi, which is us, is gaining ground. Sorry, Coke, us gaining ground. Among the core movie, like there might be a multi-layered way to tease out the assumption, right? It could be something like Coke preference is going up among like 18 to 40-year-olds. 18 to 40-year-olds buy the most movie tickets. Therefore, the core movie theater demographic is expressing through surveys a preference for Coke. We could even use that in a pitch to AMC. Something like that, right? So that, again, these are contrived, and these don't have the same like deep-seated emotional stuff as the political issues that you're talking about, but that's one way to do it. One way would be, what is, like, from an epistemology point of view, so you know we're going to fail if we go into movies. How do you know? And how would it affect your conviction if any of those precepts were shown to not be worth putting all your eggs in that basket?
And then also, a lot of times, I guess, in a corporate setting too, there are some of those reasons that people either do not want to share, or they don't even know, because it might be that they are so attached to the current market because they are experts in grocery stores. That's all their relationships, and they've been doing it for 15 years, and they feel threatened that, hey, this is something new. I might have a weaker position because of that, right? So in that case, you almost need to anticipate that, and then make sure that when you're actually presenting the model, you kind of handle that objection too.
Right. And even like pulling that out, like if you could get somebody, I mean, this would be a fairly advanced line of questioning, because you're trying to get an emotional thing on the table in an environment where we all pretend that we don't have emotions, even though we very much do. But if we're doing this and I say, hey, like, what's driving your aversion to movie theaters? And you're like, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've mastered the grocery store space. I don't know anything about movie. How am I supposed to be our chief distribution? How am I supposed to be head of distribution if you're going into like a completely orthogonal market? Oh, okay. Where do I go with that kind of questioning? Well, tell me, what about distributing to grocery stores versus distributing to movie theaters? What are some of the key differences? What are some of the things that make you nervous about that? We'll get some stuff out from you. Okay. Well, you might say, oh, there's the density of grocery stores is generally higher, so we can have much more efficient runs. Right? Movie theaters are way more spread out, and so they have smaller footprints. So I'm doing more driving for less volume. So that makes me uncomfortable. I said, okay, that's a very real one. But I guess at what level of ROI or like improved revenue growth would this problem be worth tackling? And you might be like, oh, well, if I guess like, my current grocery trucks are, I have no idea if this is the right way to think about logistics. But my current grocery truck run, I'm getting like 3-to-1 ROI per truck. I think if you could show me 7-to-1 on a movie theater run, then it's worth kind of like retrofitting or whatever. Oh, okay, let me go back and solve that problem, the data science. Let's see what we can get out to. And if I do it and it comes back to 4-to-1, maybe it isn't as good as I thought it was. Right? Now, I've updated my model with your model. Frame clash or whatever, right? But like, the point is like, I didn't know that we needed a certain like profit per run. So yeah, fine. The movie theater is lucrative, but we're still hauling liquids to get there. Right? And so maybe it sucks from that's a lot of revenue, but there's no margin. This is an example. Okay, I need 7-to-1 on the truck to make the movie theater because they're so spread out, and they're gonna refill less frequently. In theory, I don't know. Again, all right, let me do. Oh, it came out to 4-to-1. You know what? This isn't as good as I thought. Let's continue to optimize. So I have to let my model be updated too. That's where one of the undercurrents in the book is this all comes from a place of empathy.
Yeah.
Right. And empathy, I don't know if some people hear that and they're like, oh, touchy-feely, squishy. No, it's like a genuine, like, I'm open to being affected by our engagement. You're open to being, you're open to being affected by our engagement. I understand as a human with thoughts, feelings, experiences, like your truth is an amalgamation of everything you've ever encountered, right? So if you're a 20-year vet, you've mastered the logistical problem, you're a distribution expert, you've mastered the grocery store problem. You know, because you've looked at you've said, no, I don't want to do movie theaters. Here's a different reason why. It's okay. Well, you're the expert. Like, what if in 2024 movie theaters are going to be the right play? What kind of economics are we looking for? 7-1 on a truck. All right, let me go see what we get. If I come back with 9-1, I have addressed that. Now we don't want to get into, well, now it's this goalpost moving, but so you need to be able to say, like, okay, so if I come back and it's 9-1, 10-1, 8, whatever, how would that affect your decision now? Because I want to make sure I'm not going to waste my time and end up with goalpost moving or solving the wrong problem, right? That might be your initial, like, okay, let me just put this out there to distract them, kind of like your stiff arm, but that doesn't solve the problem or get you sold, right? So that's how you kind of close the loop before you burn resources trying to solve that problem, of course.
It's so interesting because so I'm reflecting on an actual real life situation on this here at TDS. So actually at some point they had the issue of having too many episodes in the backlog. That's a good problem to have. It's just too many smart people, too many good conversations, too much good content to publish. And we had a production process in which, okay, to hit the kind of quality that we want, especially with the shorter clips and all that, we kind of need the every 2-week cadence. And I was very much close to the process, so that's what we settled in. And my business partner came from the outside after having been like kind of a little bit removed from that. And that was an issue of, hey, we want to record even more, but as long as we have this backlog, we can't record even more. So it's like, okay, why don't we publish weekly, right? And I was very entrenched emotionally. And no, we can't do that. You can't actually, because X, Y, and Z. And how he turned me in a conversation, I was very emotionally charged about that because, like, no, you don't get it. You know, there's a production process, and this is how we create the assets for it and all that. And he did exactly that. I don't think he knew exactly what he was doing, but by actually leaning in and just kind of peeling those layers back of, okay, why can't we? And then whatever I say, okay, and how would you feel if we did this, right? How would it look like if we did that? And whatever objection I threw, right, we always ended up in the calendar. We always ended up me kind of actually articulating that, no, it's very possible. And mind you, not so long after, I became the person who was pushing the one episode a week, right? So this is so funny because as you were talking me through that, I reflected on the very real life situation. I remember how pissed off I was in the call, and I came out of it like actually very happy with the outcome, and I became a champion, within 30 minutes or so, maybe 45.
Right. You updated your model. It's not in this book, but it's often cited, right? So I can't remember the guy who did it. Look it up. Mm-hmm. But the guy who broke the 4-minute mile, right? Yeah, so that record.
Roger Bannister was his name.
Okay, nice.
Believe me,
I'm very impressed if you actually got that right. But that record stood for a long time. He broke it, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of other people broke it because suddenly it was possible. Right? Same thing with the 1,000-pound deadlift. Same thing with the 1,000-pound squat. All these like very measurable feats of athleticism. Right? So you were like, no, it's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks. Then he's like, he opened you up to, it's possible to get it done in a week. And then you updated your model. You're like, okay, my model said it's impossible. Now it's possible. And then entrepreneur brain kicks in. Okay, well, why the hell are we not doing it in a week then?
Yeah.
Boom. So within 45 minutes, you went from resistant to ferocious advocate. And that's a great segue into one of the other parts about learning where I said cover your mouth and wave goodbye. That other person had to shut up at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why, awkward pauses, awkward silence makes everybody very nervous, especially in a meeting where it's got a little bit high stakes, right? Like if you ask me a question and there's a 3-second pause before I answer, or if I ask you a question, it's a 3 second. 3 seconds is not that long. Okay, we have the timer here from Riverside. Let's just sit for 3 seconds. Ready, go. That's not bad, right? Because there's no tension, right? But if I was like, hey, can we move to a weekly production schedule? In
we can't. Yeah.
Right.
The tension.
In my head, 3 seconds became like 30 minutes, and so I immediately said, well, maybe if we did like a 10-day schedule instead. Like I start to panic because of the pause, and I might interject something that ruins the learning. It's literally like updating software in a weird way. Like once I get you, there's some other content in the book where he talks about like when you're trying to move somebody internally and you're trying to achieve learning, imagine there's this like road and it's all bendy and zigzaggy and stuff, but there's also a straight path. And like you go in and out of the straight path, but if you can get them on the straight path, for the love of God, don't distract them back into the maze. They're on the straight path. You got them there. Shut up and let them walk the straight line to the destination, right? So, or like when your computer's updating, like when Chrome decided to spontaneously update in the middle of our conversation, like I couldn't use it while it was updating. I can't use your brain while it's updating. Okay? I can't use my computer when it's updating. If I get the blue screen with the swirling dots, I don't know if you're on Apple or I don't know what Apple does, but with Windows, you get the swirling update. You can't use it while it's updating. It's not that different from the human brain. So if you're updating your mind, if I could tell that I've like somehow I got in there, and you're either through a question of like, well, what if this prior was no longer relevant, or hey, I'm showing you something that is shocking your priors, and you're like, like the black swan example. I have in my hands a black swan. I can prove to you it is a black swan. I've got a genetic assay and all this other stuff. You're gonna be like, whoa. And then it's like you're glitching. It's like you can like picture the swirl on your head. Like if I say anything to you while you're updating, I'm actually gonna lock you into the no. I'm gonna it's almost like I not only stop you from updating, but somehow it's like I add inertia to it for the next time. So that's why it's so important to don't interrupt the model, because you're just going to entrench the counter perspective. And that's very uncomfortable in a meeting, especially when you're like, hey, what if Pepsi was not as untouchable as they were 5 years ago? What if they were vulnerable? And then you're like, so would you go into it? You're like, broke the model, like broke the update. Nope. Nah, I would, there's still too much inertia. Wait until you come back and say, I think it would be reasonable to revisit this if I had confidence that Pepsi was vulnerable. We're affecting change. Okay.
This is so funny because these silences. So Bex, I did work in central London in more like combative sales roles, and there are environments where deals are won and lost really as like a battle, and after the deal is done, both parties appreciate it, but it's more like that. And there the silences. Sometimes we call it the silent game, which is basically was just a frame battle of who speaks first. It's like literally who will turn the wheel before we fall off a cliff. And I kid you not, like I'm not exaggerating. We had like 4 or 5 minute silent games sometimes, like in that environment. It happens, and it's just pure. I always just thought about this purely as a frame battle, but obviously at that point, both parties know what's going on, right? It's a very interesting thing. But here, what you're offering, which I love, is that to shift to that learning frame. No, there's actual. This is silence, but there's actual like processing going on after a model update. And when you said that, how come people go from being these super resistant, entrenched, emotionally resistant stakeholders to someone who's a ferocious advocate? Is because also that learning is an enjoyable thing. It actually has like a dopaminergic effect.
Great point. Yeah.
Of like learning in the moment. I loved it. Now that I reflected also on that engagement with my business partner, I remember feeling good about it, right? So there's like a positive emotional undertone to the whole thing. And now I know it because it was the learning of it. Because look, I did not know that it was possible before. I just did not have access to that information because it was closed off by my preconceptions and by my biases, by the way. And by the way, I did do the quick research, and it's actually called the Roger Bannister effect. So it's even that's the name, right?
So you knew, So you knew the guy, and he has his own effect.
I didn't know that he had his own effect, but I knew about that case study. No, that's really interesting. And also, now that I reflect on it, so I was already sold on the solution. So I could have been, if the pain wasn't there, I think I would have needed to be sold on the fact that we need to release weekly, right? And then in that scenario, I would have imagined that a series of questions around what would happen if we, like getting on the same page of what would happen if we release weekly, and not even talking about the viability of that, right? In general, in an alternative universe, what kind of benefits would that have? But in this case, that was a pain already, which you could easily sell into, right?
Right, yeah. Painkillers versus vitamins.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is fascinating. Also because it kind of, again, I can see all those different disciplines kind of connecting on this whole platform of learning. And even now that we think about the whole inception concept of getting someone like articulate the ideas that you're trying to implement, I think this is the more easily adoptable format of that, right? Because it's the inception thing, it's a little bit ephemeral, but then learning and teaching is very much a lived experience for everyone on a daily basis. Right. And it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah. And, your example where you started the call as a no, you learned, and then you advocated, like that's a great example of like perfect storm, right? Mm-hmm. Because go back to the soda metaphor, like the allegory of the soda, right? Like that was probably 6 months of trying to get people to learn, and it still had fairly poor conviction. So some people were like rabidly enthusiastic about it. It was a mixed bag. But you can tell, there were some people who just, this is one of the challenges of like really large organizations is you can't win them all. And sometimes you have to like really get things to go and have the full impact, right? So the fact that you can't win them all is important because in your case, the learning was very quick. But by the way, one thing to think about, it also is a ratcheting mechanism. Like once you learn, it's in, right? Mm-hmm. Like once you learned that 1 week was possible, you weren't going to get off of that. Mm-hmm. You would need an equally powerful countervailing persuasion or update to your model to get you back to 2 weeks. So like the persuasion via learning is super sticky. Right? Like think about it. Once you learn that 2 + 2 = 4, right? It would take something that you've learned it. Now it's a fact. It's kind of, again, it's a silly, stupid example, but like it would take something seismic to convince you that 2 + 2 = 5. Right? So when they taught you, when they got you to learn, okay, if you got you to a week, that's it, dude. Like you are bulldogging 1 week with the same vigor that you were bulldogging 2 weeks, and it's not going back the other way. So that's why the learning is so important, right? Because we can forget things. That's why learning facts. It's not learning via facts. It's learning via operating model, right? Like think about what it would take for me to persuade you that it's okay to steal.
Yeah,
I would have to like almost rip everything out to the studs and like overwrite your entire moral operating model in order to get you to say it's okay to steal and operate accordingly, right? So that's why. So think about that. Like, okay, if I had gotten that full wide scale learning about movie theaters, we would have gobbled up that market share like it was hotcakes. And there would have been no looking back. We would have burned the ships, right? It's like, all right, we're going into the movie theaters because we've all learned it. We all have that same conviction. And it would take an equally strong case and learning and whole ordeal to get them to go back to grocery stores. So the reason I'm saying that about the learning is, yeah, it's super sticky, but it can be super time consuming.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right.
Because I know that, buyer's remorse also comes, or when the persuasion fizzles out, when it's, for example, it's all hot cognitive. Because what we're talking about at the end of the day, these facts, you're not selling with facts by laying out facts, but actually the learning will need to include facts. That's what it is, like the operating model. So it's interesting that it's a cold cognitive approach. Is just that you're applying the hot cognition maybe in the beginning to break through initial barriers, capture the attention and all that. You could also just sell with hot cognition, get everyone on an emotional high, but that fizzles out, right? That fizzles out.
Always, yeah. So this is where McRaney, this is where, like, if you're gonna, let's say you're like, you know what, these guys gave one book 2 episodes, or one author 2 episodes. I bought the fun cognitive biases one, and I really want How Minds Change. I'm gonna just read that, and that's gonna be my sole input. My entire model of persuasion is gonna be based on this. So here's where it's gonna have problems in a corporate environment. We talked a little bit about this, right? It's about the timing. So you have to shut up when the silence comes in, because the silence is the signal that learning is happening. That's the system update. Don't interrupt the system update. Okay? I think when we did the Voss episode, I told you, like, when he asked Jack Welch a question, he like scrunched up and was like glitching, yeah. Right? Like, if you cause a glitch, shut the hell up, for the love of God. Like, you're potentially gonna get there. Okay? But think about some of the other stuff we've talked about. So when I'm challenging your priors, and I'm trying to update your model, let's get the challenge out of it. And I'm trying to help you update your model, or even have my own model updated. I am like, it's like bricks in a wall, right? Now, sometimes you get, let's do Jenga instead. Sometimes you pull out the right Jenga brick and the whole thing comes down, and now you get to rebuild the whole model, like the 1 week versus 2 week. Sometimes I flick a completely irrelevant brick out. That means I solved the wrong problem. That's why, like, as data scientists, we can say, okay, so if I told you that Pepsi was no longer super entrenched, what would you do? Well, now I got to think about profits per truck. Okay, if I got you to like 9-1 on the profits per truck, and Pepsi is vulnerable, then what would we do? Right? Like, when you're doing it like that, it starts to heat up the conversation, and you're not really gonna make progress because you're actually like mushing them deeper into their position. All right. So you need this. There's like softer ways to do it. We don't have time to like perfectly coach everybody's inquiry. But the point is, all right, maybe I knock one of the bricks out, but your model is robust to losing that brick. And this is why, like, when they use the examples of the people canvassing for political causes, it's like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is it should always be illegal, and 10 is it should be legal with no encumbrances, where are you on the issue of abortion? Right? And they'll get a number. And then they check, and all they want to see is if they moved 1 position in either direction. Let's say you're starting out with a 2, so you're like vehemently opposed to it. Their success criteria is 2 to 3, not 2 to 8.
Yeah.
Right? Or 2 to 10. So think about, all right, I'm going to canvass a neighborhood multiple times. I might have 8 conversations with someone. I can get you 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 5, 5 to 5, 5 to 5, 5 to 6, right? That's a very real thing. That could be happening with you reflecting. That could be happening with me engaging with you. But that can happen over the course of 6 months, a year. That's why they're canvassing way in advance of an issue. Or it depends on the tactics, right? Because if I can get you from 4 to 6, which might be possible. That's probably a lot easier than 2 to 6, right? But their 6, like the McRaney system, as picked up by these experts, is designed to move you 1 point on a 10-point scale and gradually, help you move along to the persuaded position, or at least get you off of sub 5, because sub 5 is a definite no. Let's say. Okay. So in a corporate environment where like it's quarterly profits, right? It's monthly sprints. It's annual earnings reports, right? Like 10K you don't get to do a 5-year 10K, right? So it's like, this is where I like to bring Voss back in, because Voss has, in the book, Never Split the Difference, he talks about must-haves and nice-to-haves, and like be super crystal clear on your must-haves, right? So like if this project of getting the company to say yes to movie theaters is my magnum opus for the year, I can't have 10 VPs that don't agree. I got to get, okay, where exactly is the sticking point here? Why is this not working? What's missing? Which Jenga block is the Jenga block? But if I've got 10 irons in the fire, maybe I can live with incremental progress. Okay, instead of realizing $8 billion of market potential, we realized $1 billion. It's still a billion, like $1 billion is $1 billion, right? So learning is slow in many situations. It's a permanent transition though, but it can be slow. If you're going to use the learning framework instead of like the Voss framework or the Claff framework, right? If you're trying to blend them all together and you start to say, you know what, this situation calls for learning, you need a longer runway. And even if you're like, okay, whatever, this hocus pocus cognitive science stuff is nonsense, think of it this way. Let's go back a few minutes to frequency is king. Frequency needs time. I can bludgeon you with a concept, movie theater, and say movie theater 50 times in 1 hour. That's not real frequency, right? I need to spread it out, right? Was it like seven impressions to make a sale? That's because of frequency.
Because of the frequency, yeah.
It's the same concept, same idea. So like I need to have 7 conversations with you, making an argument from maybe different angles, maybe incorporating your feedback to make sure that my analysis is robust to your feedback. It might take me 7 conversations to get you to say yes to movie theaters. Okay, well, if it's December and you need your 2025 strategy in a week, there's no room for frequency. There's no room for learning. We're going to go with the status quo. Hey, don't give me an orthogonal strategy. Help me maximize my current strategy, my status quo strategy. Oh, okay, fine, we do that. But by the way, there's a ton of money over here that you're leaving on the table. But if I can get you in July for a December decision that becomes your 2025 strategy, I've got the room for the frequency. I've got the room to find the right Jenga block. I've got the opportunity to potentially update your model or update my own and work on the right problem. Because at the end of the day, our job is to work on problems that have impact. So if we're flicking the wrong Jenga block, or if our model is not productive, we're not going to have impact. We're not going to get the raises, the bonuses, and the promotions. So our model has to be just as amenable to being updated as theirs, so that everyone needs to be aligned. But if we go from the position of data science has the panopticon, so more often than not, we're persuading the business and not vice versa, you need room. You need frequency. You need to accomplish learning, but it can't just be vomit the facts on their shoes, because that's never going to work.
I love it because each touch point that you have with your stakeholders, so even in sales, it's all about like intentionality. Every touch point needs to have a purpose.
Yep.
And in this case, it's such a clear goal of, look, I want learning to take place, and I want the kind of learning to take place where the right model gets updated. And it goes both ways. So if you come in with that attitude that either my model will get updated or the other person's, and that's progress.
Right. Exactly.
And that's actually at the heart of the collaboration.
Exactly. And so collaborative power or whatever, that's a big part of like McRaney. And I don't know if I gave this enough airtime, but like, let's potentially get out of winning as a mindset and get into, like, can we get to big T truth? Or at least close enough where the truths aren't fighting each other. It becomes degrees of agreement as opposed to an explicit, slap bang agreement.
And it's very interesting because it becomes like this whole persuasion toolkit becomes that asset that you bring into every interaction that will generate value,
right?
By its very nature, right? It will actually progress the common cause that you guys have. So right. I think also this emerging pattern here is the collaboration. Even when we talked about CLAF, it's like ultimately what you want to do, even with the frames, you want to assert like the collaborative frame when the collaboration takes place. Right? But this makes it even clearer.
Yeah, I mean, I go back when we talk about collaboration, we talk about frames. I go back to Piaget, which is the play, the mammalist or animal scientist who found the play circuit. And, they found like big rats have to let little rats win 30% of the time or they don't want to play with them. Like, okay, are we just rats? Cue the bullet with butterfly wings lyrics, but like, see how old I am? But you didn't have to agree so quickly. But like collaboration is play in a corporate environment. And if you're going to be a jerk and you're going to be unilateral on everything, then no one's going to want to play, even though, technically we have to. But, there's lots of ways to look like you're collaborating, but you're actually sabotaging.
And if you want to create that environment where now everyone wants to play and that's where everyone's most engaged, then what I love is that what we're working towards here, again, from these building blocks, is that specific toolkit and field manual playbook, if you will, that can bring into each of these situations.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right.
So let's wrap it up, right? Let's wrap up McRaney.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this definitely deserved the two episodes, right? This was a major model update for me in the best way, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So, we're going to look at what comes next. I think now we're well positioned to take an additional step towards the grand finales, because that will be a multi-step process of baking out the synthesis. But, I thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation as well. Do you have anything else to add, Heshad, on this topic, Dave?
No, just, for everyone that's been on this journey, now we're at like hour 3 of McRaney, right? So there's 3 books in his repertoire. You Are Not So Smart, You Are Less Dumb, fun books about cognitive biases, How Minds Change is a seriously super interesting book about the cognitive science of mind change. And it introduces this concept of mind change as learning, persuasion as learning. I think that's really the original contribution. That's where you're really carving out some new ground here. And I think for data scientists, many of which have been at least exposed to Bayesian concepts, like learning as a Bayesian problem. Like you have priors, from your priors, you assign probabilities or assertions or beliefs or perspectives. Your priors and my priors are different, so we're the same inputs could generate different outputs because they're ultimately models. And so if you frame your persuasion as updating someone's model, you can have this really sticky effect. Updating a model is learning, but you can't treat learning as barrage of facts. The learning has to be really kind of playing with the underlying epistemology, seeing which of those Jenga blocks is the right Jenga block, potentially knocking it out or convincing them to pull it out and then rebuild the model. And, whether it's very, very serious political issues or whether or not we can get production down to a week and a whole bunch of stuff in between, this is a very compelling way to structure persuasion. And so everybody needs this in their toolkit. So
plus, what I love about this,
closing thought on McRaney. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, no, just that also as a cherry on top, why I love this also is how well aligned the whole concept is, even conceptually, with the language of data science.
Yeah.
So it just happens to be this whole model update is the closest to what data professionals deal with and think about anyways on a daily basis. So that might be another reason why it lends so well.
Yeah, why we saved it for last.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the real reason. That's the real reason.
Yeah, we'd be just teasing up to this point. Fantastic, sir. Always enjoy our chats, and I look forward to our next round.
Yeah, man. Now it's getting into uncharted territory.